building to the top, as I'm going to show you in a moment, no, it could not have. This is a very redundantly designed building. How many of you know structural engineers? They design things 10 times more stronger than they need to, don't they? But also, then this instability travels laterally through the building. Could never have happened. I want you to see this computer model. These are the worst fires that we have photographic or video evidence of, by the way. Now, here's the computer model. What I just described to you, they're showing you in this computer model. What you're seeing is a failure of 400 structural steel connections per second. This is like spraying a hose on a sandcastle. You can't destroy a building like this, like a house of cards. These are all independently connected in a moment-resisting steel frame structure. Extremely redundant. What else is wrong with this picture? We have the top crumbling in on itself and the building actually beginning to tip over, which looks nothing like the collapse of the actual building. They don't even tell us what happens next. There's only 2 or 3 seconds of this building's collapse. They stop it. Why? Because it will look absolutely nothing like real life. They can't even get their computer model to fail the way the building does. They spent 7 years developing this, and millions of dollars, and they still can't do it. So you can see we have several problems, and now you get a sense of why we have 1,500 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation. You would have seen massive warping, bulging in that building, like they show in their computer model, because if there was a collapsing of the interior structure, that interior structure is very rigidly connected to the exterior structure. So we would not have, if there was a cascading interior collapse, we would have seen something very different in the video. And that the building falls like a house of cards, neatly into its own footprint. The center of the building is in the center of the pile. How do we get a building to fall straight down? We have to remove the column supports in a symmetry and a timing that, well, we have to take out all 24 core columns within a fraction of a second of each other. And then the perimeter columns as well. How do we do that? Only explosives can do that. Fire does not have this level of precision. So we have evidence upon evidence upon evidence of controlled demolition here. And here's some more. How fast does this building fall?
We can measure the downward acceleration of Building 7 by video frame analysis. Use a magnifying glass to place markers in the corner of the building on each frame. From this, we can get a data table and various graphs. The slope of this graph indicates acceleration, which is shown here to be about minus 10.279, plus or minus 0.6. Free fall on the back beam is minus 9.8 in these units. That falls within the margin of error of this measurement. In other words, the rate of fall of Building 7 in the first few seconds is indistinguishable from free fall in a vacuum.
Free fall in a vacuum. Well, it's free fall. Let's just understand this. The overall building falls in 6.5 seconds. The perimeter. Here's a bag. I'm going to drop it. 3, 2, 1. How fast did that bag drop? Free fall. What does that mean? That means it dropped because there was no resistance, virtually no resistance underneath that bag. So the bag converted all of its gravitational potential energy into kinetic energy, motion. It can't do any other work and fall at that rate. It can't crush 80 columns on each floor. It can't crush one column on any floor, or it would slow down in order to do that work. Now, NIST acknowledges this. After denying that it came earlier, denying that it came down at free fall. They said, well, if it came down at free fall, that would mean there'd be no structure. Well, then they acknowledge, after being forced by David Chandler, Stephen Jones, other members of AE911 troop, they acknowledge that it came down at free fall, but they do not acknowledge the implications of that the structure had to have been removed. How do you do that? Explosives are the only way to remove a structure for at least 8 stories, because this building came down in free fall for 2¼ seconds, which is about 100 feet, 30 meters or so. The building is gaining downward momentum with each second, indicating no resistance. And this, what we have is the complete dismemberment of the structure, like a house of cards. 47 stories of molten steel resisting structure, very rigidly welded columns to beams. You can't have it fall like a house of cards into a pile 4 or 6 stories. It would have been 10, 20 stories if it would have collapsed at all. Remember, buildings that collapse due to natural causes, they fall over to the path of least resistance. Their structural elements are not dismembered. We have minimal damage to adjacent structures. Yeah, there's some damage to this building. Some more damage to this building, but pretty much a good job, if you will. Sounds of explosions heard by witnesses. Let's see. Here's Craig Bartmer, New York Police Department whistleblower.
And the whole time you're hearing boom, 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 boom. So, I think I know an explosion when I hear it. You know, I was real close to building 7 when it fell down, and I don't know, but that didn't sound like just a building falling down to me while I was running away from it. There's a lot of eyewitness testimony down there hearing explosions. I didn't see any reason for that building falling down the way it did, and a lot of guys should be saying the same thing.
Well, they are. Here's another one. Kevin McPadden, former Air Force medic, and his experience.
And then it was like another 2-3 seconds. You heard explosions, like boom, and it's like a distinct sound. It's not like when the compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. To me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
This is very helpful. Now, guess what? None of these witnesses, and there are hundreds of them, of explosions appear in any of the official stories. Why not? Here's another one, Barry Jennings, who was a deputy manager for the emergency office on the 23rd floor. The whole building had been evacuated about, in the morning after the first plane hit the tower. And so these guys all left, but he walks back into the tower with the attorney for Mayor Giuliani.
When we got to the 8th floor, I started walking to one side of the building. The other side of the building was gone. The first explosion I heard when I was on the stairwell landing, when we made it down to the 6th floor. Then when we made it back to the 8th floor, I heard some more explosions. What was that? Like a boom. Like an explosion.
More than one?
Yes. We started walking down the stairs and made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. When we get outside, police officer comes to me and says, you have to run. We have more information of bombs, so you have to run. Look.
More witnesses of bombs, more information of bombs. The FBI's operating hypothesis, given that they found bombs in vans parked in and around the World Trade Center. Their working hypothesis was bombs, and yet the whole story changed, and there's nothing that appears in any of the 9/11 Commission report or any of the other official reports, nothing about bombs or explosions, like this one, which happened on the afternoon of 9/11.
Yeah, everybody that you can tell you I'm okay, all right? Yeah, no. You want to call your mother?
what is going on? It's like a whole part of the picture is missing. Enormous pyroclastic clouds of pulverized concrete. Watch as away from Building 7, you'll see these developing rapid expansion of these dust clouds due to the intense heat, much hotter, much more heat than is available in those small office fires that you saw, expanding these clouds in this collie-shaped manner, racing about 50 or 60 kilometers per hour in every direction away from Building 7. This is all direct evidence of explosive destruction, and fire can't account for any one of them. Let's see why. Here's a fire. A building, World Trade Center 5 is completely engulfed in fire. If any of those buildings was going to collapse due to fire, we would expect it to be this one. Did it? No. Mid-rise, high-rise office buildings do not collapse as a result of fire, especially these fires, and a lot of smoke, which is quite curious, but most believe that this smoke is coming from the World Trade Center 5 and 6, which had quite bad fires, caught in a negative air pressure behind this corner of the building, since there's no smoke, or very little smoke coming out of any of the windows on this other side. And so it's completely destroyed all the way down to the ground. Now, what does the FEMA report, the first report that came out in May of 2002, tell us? The specifics of the fires in World Trade Center 7 and how they caused the building to collapse remain unknown at this time. What? You spent $600,000 in over a year and you don't know what brought the building down? Our best hypothesis, fire plus random damage and incomplete collapse, has only a low probability of occurrence. Wait a minute. What do you do when your best hypothesis has a low probability of occurrence? You go back and find one that has a higher probability of occurrence. Not done this time. They say further research, investigation, and analysis are needed to resolve this issue. Unfortunately, though, for those hoping to resolve the issue, all of the steel, with the two pieces accepting, was sent to China for recycling at a rate of 400 truckloads per day shipped out of the World Trade Center site. All of it was gone before the report came out saying, we don't know how the building came down. Maybe we should look at the steel. Oh, it's gone. Well, Bill Mann, editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering Magazine, says crucial evidence that can answer many questions is on the slow boat to China, showing an astounding ignorance of government officials to the value of a thorough scientific investigation. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately. Did it? No, we didn't listen to him. What do we expect to do in a forensic analysis?
Normally, when you have a structural failure, you carefully go through the debris field, looking at each item, photographing every beam as it collapsed and every column where it is in the ground, and you pick them up very carefully and you look at each element. We were unable to do that in the case of Tower 7.
Why not? Oh, the steel was all gone. Well, what do the experts say? Here's Danny Jowenko from right here in the Netherlands, 27 years.